Hello class. Today we're going to be discussing what makes objects sink and what makes objects float. Let's begin by discussing density. Density is the degree of compactness of a substance. The density of an object determines whether it will float or sink in another substance. An object will float if it is less dense, like the picture on the left, than the liquid it is placed in. An object will sink if it is more dense, like the picture on the right, than the substance it is placed in. Now let's explore density further by doing a classroom activity. Hope you enjoy! Here are the objects we will be testing. Let's get started. Here we have a jar filled with a liquid, which is water. So the first object we will be testing is the key ring. Now if the key ring is less dense than this liquid, then it will float. If the key ring is more dense than the liquid, then it will sink. Let's see what happens. The key ring sank. So that means the key ring is more dense than the liquid in this jar. So I'm going to put it over here under sink. The next object we will be testing is the cap eraser. Now the same thing applies to the cap eraser. If the cap eraser is less dense than this liquid, then it will float. If it is more dense than the liquid, it's going to sink. Let's see what happens. Now even though the cap eraser has a hole in it right here, it is still more dense than the liquid, which means it is more compact together, so therefore it sank. So we're going to put it under the sink. Now our next object that we're going to be testing is the penny. Here is the penny. So let's see what happens. The penny did the same thing as these other two items and it just sank. That means it is so compact, and it is more compact than the liquid in this jar. So now we're going to put the penny under sink. The next object that we will be testing is the magnet. Now the magnet is similar to these three items, so it might sink or it might float. Let's see what happens. The magnet sank, so that means it is more dense than the liquid in this jar. Next, let's test the highlighter. Now the highlighter is circular on the bottom and the top, and it has a little hole in there on the bottom, but even though it has a little hole, doesn't mean it will float. So let's see what happens. Actually, the highlighter did float because the highlighter is less dense than this liquid, means it will float. So we're going to put the highlighter under float. Next, let's test the spoon. Here we have the spoon. Now the spoon is plastic and it's very light. So it might sink or it might float. We just have to see how dense it is. Now the spoon actually sank. So even though it was still light, that didn't mean it was going to float, which means the spoon is more dense than this liquid. Let's try it this way. See? So we're going to put that under sink. And lastly, we have the straw. So let's test our straw to see if it will sink or float. In this case, the straw went all the way to the bottom, so that means it sank. And this amount of substance in this liquid is less dense than the straw. The straw is more dense than the liquid. So that means the straw sank.